So we're live streaming.
We're live.
We're live. And we put the 15 minutes on beforehand.
I just hopped. It's on now.
Right.
Hi, Maura. Hey, look, I'll say the mobile.
There'll be 4 by the end. So,
No, I've had enough, thank you.
Well, thank you all for coming. I'm going to pass over to these two men who know exactly what they're doing.
Good luck with that.
Thanks for coming.
Yes, good evening, and makes it sound like a television show. So we're sort of trying a slightly different format this evening by having an interview. Really, just we sometimes thought that Mark might be interesting, but we'll see.
Yeah, I'm expecting scores.
So I've known Mark for a good 10 years now, I think, but as someone that sort of came through the Innovation Centre down at Sussex, and then went through that process and sort of built and sold his company, which is an interesting story in itself. But what we wanted to do was combine 2 aspects really. One is that story and people having that interest in terms of how people build their businesses and move through that process, but also the whole aspect of big data and the way in which it can move and how the different sort of ideas and methods are utilised within different parts of the sector. What's generic, what's specific, but also how you work within that data side and create innovation and how markets work with innovation. And I think that's one of the key challenges that Mark has sort of managed to find his way through, which is to his credit. So that's just by way of introduction. So we're just going to sort of do it on interview type basis, and we'll sort of cover aspects of both the business but also the data side, which is I think what I told you, wasn't it?
Vaguely.
So to start back in sort of 2006, so when I first met you, so were you always destined to be an entrepreneur, to be your own boss?
Well, that's 2 questions really. To be my own boss, I'm not that. I never. So my history, just a brief history. I'm a biologist by training and went straight. Never really shook a test tube in anger post university, and went straight into the pharmaceutical kind of industry. I never really set out to say I am going to be owning my own company, developing my own thing. But I have to say, in my kind of time at industry, I did have that sense of square peg in round hole, really, pushing boundaries and people going, I thought I was doing all the normal things that everyone should be doing. But clearly I was agitating and worrying people about how close I was going to and slightly over the boundaries. So you kind of you do feel you're a bit different, and now I guess you would say I was entrepreneurial. They would say I was a pain in the arse, definitely. And that's when you got that sense that actually I could probably do this on my own. That makes sense.
It does make sense. I think it's one of those things whether people are actually entrepreneurial within the corporate environment and take it outside, or find their innovation when they start working, given the space to work on their own. So did you find that sort of, so what prompted you to actually start your own business then? Was it sort of...
Well, so the company, apart from being a pain in the arse to lots of people there, some of the, so I work with a large global pharmaceutical company, and some of the people there recognised that I had this entrepreneurial, so I got put in charge of special projects internally at the pharma industry.
You were special.
I was special. I was put in the special room with the special people, and what that involved is one part of the business dealt with their kind of end of life cycle kind of products really, and it basically said that they're the end of life cycle products. We can't afford those not to really make money anymore. Here's some money. Just make sure they don't lose any more money, and gave me free rein, and that kind of unleashed the demon in me. And I did a few projects using data, and I had very little money, no head count, and had to be innovative, agile, and entrepreneurial to kind of deliver what they wanted. So I did that, and then all of a sudden, all the competitor companies to that company I was working for said, "Actually, you know what you did there? Could you come and do that with us? And could you come and that was the kind of prompt to leave."
Good. And then you came to us. Why did you come to us?
I've asked that question a lot over the year. No, I mean, initially it was a referral. Our industry, so when I left, the business was still related to selling to the pharmaceutical industry. The pharmaceutical industry, like lots of large corporate industries, is all about gloss and image and how you look before they look at the substance. Really, you can't, unless you look a certain way, you can't get even into the substance. The site at Sussex, it gave the right image and the right presence for us. Was the initial kind of pull. And it, beyond that, I think, I know, it soon morphed into the confidence thing. Really, we'll come on to, I'm guessing, more because I know what the questions are. But the confidence thing, when you're working with large companies and you're running a company, and it's very easy to be bullied and pushed around and not have confidence in your next move. And I think that was a key, beyond the image and the gloss and the presence it gave us and the links to the academia, which were invaluable for our business. The single most important aspect of our business it gave, as well as creating the business structure, was the confidence to kind of grow.
That's nice. Everybody else came because it was free parking.
Yeah. And we could rent our parking space out to Brighton Hove Albion. I forgot that bit.
Good. So now you're there, and give us a bit of a feel for what, in fact, it was Impact RX then.
It was
what
Impact
did the
RX.
RX stand for?
Scripts.
Prescriptions.
It's a known kind of abbreviation for prescriptions in pharmaceutical industry.
Okay. So what was the primary product that the company was set up to do?
So, initially, I'm talking to some people here, initially it was a kind of consultancy business where we kind of built a war chest, but the kind of core sentiment or the core kind of driver, underlying kind of proposition really for the company was in the pharma industry, life science industry, bio industry globally, traditionally clinically derived data, so data in labs, was gold standard. But that was wearing thin with the likes of the NHS, other health economies around the world, because no one really believed clinically derived data anymore. They didn't believe they could get the same results as the pharmaceutical industry got in the trial. So this concept of operational data, anyone who could get data from normal life in healthcare from anywhere and put that together and come up with answers had a valuable proposition.
So it's the Volkswagen syndrome.
Yes, so yeah, we put the chip in in the Volkswagen. So we effectively set up operational supply chains of data, of different in-market data sets, and got feeds and set up a really lots of different bits of supply chain that we could then bolt on different added value services, so apps, reporting tools, etc., and sold those under license. That was a long explanation for something that I felt should have been shorter.
But was it clear? That's the question. So in terms of this is based around a particular drug or a particular condition, and you've collected data from there.
So I'll give you a case study that might be better. So a Novo Nordisk, who are a large diabetes company, would say, we've got a question of why the outcomes for certain segments of patients are not as good, and the government, the NHS, are not going to pay us as much for our drug anymore because the outcomes are not really very good. We need you to prove that our outcomes are better than they think they are, or understand why they're not as good in those patients, and we would then answer that question by extracting data from GP surgeries, from hospitals, from pharmacies. We set up our own collection to augment gaps in that data. We set up survey points. Really, whatever supply chain needed to be set up to create the data set, and then we added that value on over time, which was an initial report and then subsequent extracts over a period of time.
Okay.
That makes sense. Good, excellent.
And so was what you were doing, was that a known technique, or was that a new methodology that you were bringing to the pharmaceutical company?
I mean, the concept, now it's a kind of, a reasonably well understood concept, but when we started, there wasn't really that many supply chains of real life information. So it was a new concept really, in terms of extracting this kind of medical information and then applying some of the kind of techniques that we got from other sectors to that data were kind of critical really. I think the key was the supply chain really, and the operational kind of mechanism around our reporting was novel at that time. That was the first novelty.
Was there an issue in trying to convince people of the credibility?
I think the industries, like a lot of industries, banking and others, which are very, on one extreme, they're very innovative for themselves, so they spend billions on creating pharmaceutical products and interventions. As commercial entities, they're quite conservative. They know what they know. They get supplied from the suppliers they know. They go to what they know, because no one gets fired for going to what you know. So to convince them that this kind of non-protocol driven, random, data, which was not controlled, was credible and valuable, was a bit of a challenge in the early days, I have to say, because they're used to very heavily protocol-driven data, which they could control, and they knew they could manage, they could understand the result was the result. And one of the things with healthcare data particularly, which is the same in lots of sectors, is when you have truly operational, observational data, it's very difficult to link cause and effect. Well, it can be difficult. That was a bit that the industry spend a lot of money on in terms of the clinical side, isolating cause and effect, and operational data. You have to find a mechanism to reduce doubt.
Okay. I think one thing that we see a lot of, and I'm sure it's never true of people in this room, is that they have a brilliant idea and a brainwave to do something, and then once they've done it, and they've done it for one client, think, oh, I'll go try and find something else to do, as opposed to trying to sort of realise the potential of the idea to actually to replicate it and to build it and to grow a business out of it. So how did you find that process of actually growing a company from an innovation?
I think the first thing to say, which is kind of I'm preempting another question on your list, which is the fact that one of the things you have to. I am the person who invents something and then gets bored of it, and then invents something else and gets bored of it, and invents something else and gets bored of it.
Another day, another product.
Another day, another product. So I think the key thing is to have some people around you who are very good at not getting bored with the things you've just invented. The beauty around data and adding value to data and data itself is that if you get it right, the shape of a P&L, the margins in data can be really significant, because one report, I wouldn't say we quite changed the label and just put another name in, but that report is valuable in multiple instances, but operationally you only have to produce it once, really, or you have to tweak it. So if you can get to a level where you can hit on a clinical domain or a question that is important, then fear within the pharmaceutical industry made everyone buy that report, because no one wanted to not know what their competitors knew. And so if you get it right, it's key just to kind of pause and industrialise that piece of information across multiple kind of people or industries, companies.
And what was the biggest issue you found in doing that? Because I suspect you weren't the best person to go and sell that.
No, I think there's multiple. There's multiple issues, but three issues really. One which we've covered, which is getting people to say, is that automatically people discredit the data because it's not what they're used to, it's not derived clinically, etc. I think the two other things are connected but different. One is, in our industry, the pharma industry, are very aggressive masters, and so the contracting process, they will try and own everything. They'll pay you £3.50 and they'll try and take the company off you if they can through a contract. And I think the key thing there is to have self-esteem, even though they're multiple times bigger than you, is to really push back on those clauses about who owns what IP, who owns, and really go through in detail who owns what, and not be hamstrung to say, if you produce a report and sell it to them, they will say you're not allowed to use any of the information, that report, those findings for anyone else, and they're limiting your business. I think the other challenge is pricing, really. I think the biggest mistake I make now, still, and have made multiple times, is I cost too often, don't value enough of what we produce. So that means I always undervalue and undersell what we give to our clients, and that's just about self-esteem and confidence, really, about selling your product at the right price and looking not just how much does it cost us to produce and then putting a 30%, 20% margin on, but saying what is the value to that person of what I'm giving them, and then pricing it properly, and finding a mechanism of actually valuing it on behalf of the person you're selling it to. If you don't have this, what will that mean to your business? And so that the value is £1 million to you, and I'm only charging you £100,000 for this instead of £3.50 that you want to pay.
And you obviously had a background within big company, within the sort of big pharma of that side. Did that sort of help you to understand it?
Yeah. I mean, it's I've been bullied for a long time, so I was used to being bullied by them. So that was good. I think having a perspective on their drivers and their kind of markets and their dynamics, and understanding all the operational bits of where purchasing get involved and that kind of thing. So that was good. I think from a business perspective as well, it's great training for, you know, putting structures into your business. So for me, having a professional, not forgetting, I think lots of companies who have seen startups come from a corporate environment and come from a large environment. As soon as they become startups, they forget everything they've been learned, and they don't put in the kind of the business planning structure that they've been rigorously taught to apply when they're in industry, and they just say, oh, I'm free now, I'll just do it how I want. But actually, that is the most valuable bit that they've given you, those structures. And when you kind of admit they were good things and apply them, they're very useful.
He was the only startup we knew who had proper budgets. So that's
Still do.
so, and I think that's, well, say a little bit about how the company then grew over the next few years.
So I guess once I got someone, so the first people really to get into the business were the understanding my own kind of weaknesses and my own what I was good at, what I wasn't. First people were the industrialisers.
That was your wife, actually, wasn't it?
My wife. She pointed out what I was good at and what I wasn't good at frequently, so I was very clear on that point, generally. But I think beyond that is getting the people who can industrialise, to free you up to go and do the bit, the selling the dream. I can sell the dream to people, I understand what they want, I can sell into their need or fear, but coming back and then designing something on a bit of paper and then giving it to someone to then industrialise and resell that to 10 other people at high margin, that was key. And then beyond that, having a, you know, letting go, I think is the other bit really, of kind of you know, letting people out, giving away your address book. So it kind of went from the operational. First step was operational, getting a proper operational process in place. We had our industry's very regulated, particularly around paid data, and we dealt with patient-sensitive data. So for a small company, the burden on us to get to a high standard of compliance, we had to have a standard of compliance of any of the large corporates at a small level. That was a plus and a minus because we could, you know, we were agile in terms of how we applied it, but obviously it was a burden of cost and time, particularly time. So that was important to get us into out of. So we kind of traded at a kind of, let's say, a £10,000 to £50,000 level with industry. As soon as we got our compliance framework in, that allowed us to trade at a kind of £100,000 to £500,000 level, kind of threshold with industry. Beyond that, then you need to fill. Once your operation's built to a discrete level, at least, it's then about filling that operation and make it sweat as hard as it can, and that's about getting more people out there who can sell a dream. So the next bit was the consultants and then sales and marketing.
And building a cage, which you sat in.
Building a cage, which was, I love that cage, I miss it dearly. The cage was where our servers were held. It wasn't really a cage, well it was a cage, but it was for servers, not people, generally.
So in that process, whilst you were building, were there particular benefits you found of sort of being in the centre and that type of thing? What sort of things helped you?
I think, I mean, you know, the confidence thing I've mentioned, I've come back onto, but I think we knew, I was talking to someone before around the, you know, you know your own sector. We knew our data, we knew the industry, we knew the propositions they wanted, we knew their weak points. The bit that we didn't really know was creating this structure. It's really important, going back to what we were saying before, proper HR structure, proper finances, and in the background where we were busy selling the dream, delivering the dream, the centre were busy putting in all this structure, which it kind of sneaks up on you, kind of what structure you've got. Even, I mean, at the end, when we left the centre, we were 29 people. so you know, reasonable size. But when we came to exit, because it kind of happens over a period of time, you don't realise what structures you put in place. And when we came in to do the due diligence, the company who was buying us, they were amazed at the kind of structure on a, you know, a small but perfectly formed way that we had in place. And that was that probably got us, I would say, another 5 or 6 times our multiple value additional to what we would get in terms of value. The structure and the robustness of and the integrity of our structure, which, you know, a lot of that was down to the sync setup, really.
And the reason I'm not asking questions in order to sort of sell what we do.
No, that's the truth.
It's really to say that actually that building those processes within a business is as important as building the client list, as important as building the product list and the P&L in terms of actually getting the valuation that you require from a business. Because every time someone comes in to view the business, looks for a process but doesn't find it, the value goes down. And if you're starting from a reasonably low level to start with, it just gets lower and lower because the apparent or perceived risk just grows from within it.
So we sold our business at 12 times its profit, which is quite a reasonable, and I would say, you know, 4 or 5 of those times were because of the structure of the company, the robustness of the company, really, because the company had real confidence in what they were buying, and when they were, you know, just simple things where you're going through the due diligence process of saying, you know, where are all your assets? So show me where all those are, and you can kind of get a list up and say, we've got a system to track all our assets, or what your financial accounts, give us your kind of performance, net gross margin, your operating costs, you split out. In a day, it was all there and given to the management accounts, perfectly formed, and it, you know, it just gave a lot of confidence to our buyers, which put us on the front foot.
Then you nicked our accountant.
Then I nicked the accountant. Yeah.
We actually did charge a transfer fee. That was one thing we learned from football. So I must admit, you were one company that I despaired of you ever exiting, because I never thought you'd ever actually made a decision to do it, because you were you were so personally involved and engaged in the company, which some companies you see they sell easily, but I couldn't see you selling easily. So what was that process of what convinced you to actually exit and sell the company on?
I mean, there was a couple of things really at that time. One was a kind of personal bit. There was, you know, well, everyone in this room will understand when I say, you know, we were typically paying ourselves 400 quid a month salary, and then the rest was dividends somewhere down the line, maybe, if we got paid any dividends. So it was not quite that, but that kind of, you know, we got paid when we got profits. And our personal circumstances meant we needed more stability than that. So it kind of put us in a position of thinking, how do we get that? I think more fundamentally was the fact that we'd really driven our growth aggressively. It was relatively, well, it wasn't easy, that was the wrong thing to say, but because the companies, the UK is a great pilot for healthcare in the world. It's probably, it's still now a kind of, even in kind of observational research, a centre where lots of the world look at, because the data richness in the UK is high in healthcare. But that meant if you're a healthcare company, you can, on the behalf of kind of GB PLC, you can get into the global markets through the UK quite quickly. And we were into global pharma, we were in South America, in France, which was great, but that was stretching our growth and our cash flow. We was all funded out cash flow, and we needed more bodies, more kit, more compliance, and we were really tight on cash flow. So we started the process. Initially, we weren't really looking at kind of selling everything. In the end, we did. And it's, you know, I guess at that stage you really need to be honest about what you're in it for yourself personally, and really be honest, because it's easy not to be. So yeah, we want to build and we want to, but it's important you're honest with yourself about what you want to get out of it, because you can make the wrong decisions if you're not. Notwithstanding that, we looked at the various options. Do you want me to talk about my exit or not?
Sure.
All right. We looked at various options, as you may have looked at, so right from angels to VCs to sector investors to family to banks, and all of which had their pluses and minuses. At that stage we decided to go with a sector investor, mainly because what we had they needed and what they had we needed, so that synergy was really strong. And at that stage we then started arguing over how much they take. They take 45% and we keep 55%, and actually you soon realise it doesn't really matter if we've got a percent more than them or 10%. The way they act and the way they contract with you means you can't do anything with what your power anyway. This is in our circumstance. And actually their attitude when they're 45% as opposed to 100% is still the same. So actually at that stage we said, look, we're just kidding ourselves that we've got any more power by having 2 or 3% more than they have, and we might as well just transfer. At that stage we sold cash with some shares in the company who bought us, and sold 100% shares, transferred some over. So yes, so personally,
you had a happy time.
Yes.
Probably better not go into that.
No.
I think one of the things that in growing sciences, the company's name as it came up, was probably it wasn't thought of being big data when you were doing it at that point.
No.
It was far more about actually how to gather that information and use it in a certain way. With what you're doing now in terms of your new company, One Genesis, that's probably far more focused within the sort of big data disciplines and taking things to different sides. Do you want to say a little bit more about big data?
I mean, yeah. I mean, big data's big. It's such a. I mean, it's almost meaningless. It is meaningless in the sense that it means. I think our experience of it, you can wander around big data for a long time in terms of looking at it and waste lots of time. I think unless you have a really clear purpose, I'll come to our purpose, of how you add value to it or how you augment it in some way to add value, you can waste time. So we, at the moment, for example, one of the key drivers in healthcare, my personal opinion, with data particularly, data is going to be the catalyst in my mind for healthcare to become a consumer market. It's already starting to consumerise around the world. It is in lots of markets already quite a consumer market, but in the UK and established Western markets, it's becoming a consumer market. The thing that is absolutely catalysing that is the accessibility and transparency of data to patients or consumers, and also, so going forward, it's around adding value to the data from a consumer perspective, and as the hysteria, in a sense, around medical data becomes less, and as it starts to link, already we're seeing Walmart linking with Diabetes UK to get data. So we were involved in a project where Diabetes UK, Novo Nordisk, who are a diabetic company, and Walmart got together on data, and basically the concept is of improving outcomes for diabetic patients. But Walmart are in there thinking, well, we're going to offer a diabetic patients a lifetime shopping list, because we know that they need a certain products to keep them healthy all the time. So we're going to discount those for the rest of your life. Fruit, veg, all the stuff you need when you're a diabetic. and diabetes, and we're going to monitor that, all of us, through the data set. Equally with a pharma company, have then looking at what, if their patients eat more fruit than anyone else or have poorer outcomes. So our very briefly, our concept going forward is transferring how other markets deal with consumer data, and transferring some of that learning into healthcare, transposing it over. The first bit of that is predictive analytics. It's used predominantly in banking and in lots of other markets, but predicting outcomes is a lot cheaper than trying to stop them when they're right in front of your nose. And health economies can't afford to be very reactive. So we've transferred some IP and technology out of finance and developing some additional IP to start using big data, to predict what might happen to individuals and populations rather than guess. And that's the future.
So in the future, you'll have the ambulance outside the door before you need
Yes, yeah, exactly. It'll be booked. I mean, we should hook up our booking system with you. In 2 years' time, John Smith, the next road up, will need a defibrillator.
It'll cost you 10 million.
Yeah. So it'll be cheap at half the price by then.
So I don't have to ask you if you knew then what you knew now, because you're starting again. So what do you know now that you didn't know then?
Oh, jeez, I mean, luckily memory loss has given me a new. I think. What did I know? What know? If I was going to tell myself something then to now, what would it be? Is that right? No.
No, it's what?
No, the other way around.
Yeah.
One of those.
What have you learned, for God's sake?
Yeah. I think the key thing is to be confident in your innovation. The thing that we didn't do, I thought we were innovative. I knew we were, but the pharma industry, when we first went, screwed us to the ground, and we sold it cheap early, and we could never get away from that ever, because we put a stake in the ground, and going up from that stake was almost impossible. And I think value it is what I've learned now, and if you don't want to pay the value, and you have to be confident and you have to be sure that it is worth that value, but if you think it is, stick to your guns. That's what I would say.
Good. Any questions from the floor?
Yeah, one question. I was interested in you saying 29 folks when you're talking about structure and building a proper infrastructure. So of your 29, I think you said you had 29 headcount.
Yes.
Approximately how much of that was infrastructure and how much of it wasn't? What was the percentage? And cost, it's a cost question really.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of varied over time. Infrastructure, I would say. What did you define as infrastructure before I kind of answer that question?
You mentioned, finance, HR type stuff.
Okay, right. Okay.
Costs in a different way.
Okay, so not direct costs working on projects.
Yeah.
So infrastructure. I mean, most of our infrastructure costs were sync actually. I mean, we had some headcount bits and bobs. I would say probably 10 to 15% of our people base were infrastructure, pure overheads, and had no direct impact on our job costs, job related.
And what was the tipping point when you felt you had to invest that much?
In terms of that 10 or 15%, just when it became, I think when you do your management accounts every month and you sit and you look, you're at the point of saying, look, it's cheaper to get this head, we could get someone, it's cheaper to get this head. And that's what actually, when you're at a place like this, when you're paying sync, when your burden of management accounts or your HR or whatever your services you're buying become so large on your management accounts that it's actually above a head, that's when you know you're kind of outgrowing the centre and you need to move, because if you're paying X amount, 40, £50,000 a year for bookkeeping, you might as well get a bookkeeper. So that it was we had very strict, very granular management accounts, we're able to track that. And if you have a few months of then, you know, we might as well just get ahead and reduce our overhead costs. And they were the trigger points, really.
There's a question over here.
Yeah, it's quite interesting what you said about Walmart, because my perception of supermarkets normally is they try and reinforce your bad habits from the loyalty program, so they see all the bad stuff you're buying and just try and sell you twice as much, you know?
Sure.
Whereas that is actually trying to sell you something different, potentially, to
Sure.
what you normally buy. And I mean, I would have thought it's quite a big step for somebody like Walmart to actually.
I think.
I mean, it might be quite a clever step, but I mean,
Yeah.
it's still quite a shift in
Yeah.
what people normally do.
And the cynical end, you would say they're just doing it to get over the impression that they're just trying to sell you bad stuff all the time.
Yeah.
And that's why they're getting engaged.
They can sell you good stuff for longer.
Well, I mean, they could sell you
Yeah,
quite expensive
well, exactly,
vegetables, of
yeah,
course,
yeah,
but they are
absolutely,
actually trying to get you to
Yeah.
change your habits rather than just,
Yeah.
I mean, what people normally do, which is just try and reinforce.
Yeah, no, and I think the lifestyle, the kind of phenotypic bit of our life, which is our lifestyle and our habits and our behaviours and, you know, our life, what we do to keep ourselves healthy, really. That's kind of out of it's out of the box now.
Yeah.
I mean,
we've got
and
sugar
as data
tax.
becomes transparent and consumers have their own data, I mean, Fitbits and you can analyse your own performance about anything, really.
Yeah.
So it's either get engaged or get left behind, I think, in supermarkets now. Because consumers have got their own stuff.
Yeah.
And in medicine now, the issue in healthcare particularly is that transparency of data and big data means that everyone's an expert patient particularly, and they're leapfrogging the expertise of the GP and saying, well, actually, I've read everything, I want this drug, actually, please. And healthcare's not really, is behind in that respect.
How many were you when you started the business in 2006?
There was me, a laptop and a broadband link in the back bedroom of our house. So that was the start. And then
And when you joined Sync?
when I joined Sync, there was 2006. There was 3, and then we exited in 2010 with 20, 26, 7, 8, 9, something like that. 20 late 20s employees.
Would you think of yourself or yourselves as a consulting firm or a software firm, or didn't it matter?
I mean, it did matter in the sense that, you know, we never really managed to fully shake off the kind of consultants bit. I mean, that, you know, I shouldn't complain about it because it can be lucrative, but with your capacity, there is a direct link with how, you know, your capacity and your earnings with consultancy. And when we really started to kind of make proper margin was when we started to disaggregate the link between consultancy. Consultancy was always there because that is what helped us sell the dream. And we always had a consulting phase at the start of all the projects. That was always paid for. But beyond that, the solutions to the consulting phase were products or service offerings that people then signed up to. And if, you know, like I say, with the information side, if you get it right, it's kind of a continual audit, re-audit loop, really, which lends itself well to consulting services, products mix. If you can kind of we didn't get it right all the time, we rarely got it right, but we got it right enough of the time to make decent margin in the end.
If you can use consulting to sell more data rather than the other way around.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
And the data, you know, the data is the data. You know, we never trade in raw data ever, because that's got you commoditize it so quickly if you trade in raw data.
Yeah. And when you exited, you personally exited completely. You didn't remain as a consultant, or you did?
I remained. So the company who bought us had the three reasons they bought us were they had lots of data they didn't know what to do with. They were under pressure. They were giving away lots of data and insight that they wanted to commercialise, and they were also under pressure from their commissioners to do more with data and to add more value and more services, which the company didn't understand what to do, how to do that. So I stayed on for 4 and a bit years with the company who bought us, and then spent a year in a restricted no man's land, and then back this year.
You're a new company, can you take it back to SIG?
To be discussed in 5 minutes' time. No, I mean there's a high likelihood we'll be getting my old seat back. Well, I don't know. Depends on this interview's gone, really.
You talked about data being the catalyst for healthcare to become a consumer market. What do you mean by that? Expand on that.
So, in the question Mike is trying to avoid is one of the, well, it wasn't trying to avoid, the company we sold to, our business to, in the last year I was there, had a very severe operational crisis. They were a care giving organisation, and they had a very, very serious crisis. Now, in a crisis, if anyone's ever been there, what you try and do is get hold of the communication, get control of the communication so it doesn't go out of control. We couldn't get control of it, and the reason we couldn't get control of it is because we didn't know, we were focusing on the wrong stakeholders. In healthcare, we're focusing on the clinicians, on the NHS, on the Department of Health, and actually the key stakeholders driving all the noise and all these other stakeholders was the patient. And the chronic patients mainly absolutely knew their condition inside out, absolutely knew where, had lots of information, and it really struck me that, you know, consumerisation of medicine is here. The consultants were jumping, everyone was jumping at the click of the fingers of these patients in these markets, so quite specialist markets. And the reason that patients were so confident is they were so well informed about their own condition, about their groups that they were in, and the reason they were so well informed is that we, as a company, and their clinicians and for themselves had got lots of information, and it was presented in the right way, they could understand it. The kind of patient groups they were involved with had done an excellent job at getting apps, getting technology, using information really smartly, getting user groups, and they were very well informed. You know, they could reference, they were ahead, they had everyone on the back foot from there, and they were publishing data on social media that we didn't have. You know, we didn't have the immediacy they had, we didn't have the insight they had, and yet they're putting us on the back foot because it was straight out there all the time.
Clayton Christensen talks about this in disruptive innovation. Innovators prescription, I think, as well. And that's one of the components of the future healthcare is that you get groups of patients who are very well informed working together to be able to shape the services that they need.
So one of the other, sorry, do you mind if I carry on? I'm a bit carried away now. But one of the things with data as a business is what's the cost of acquiring data? So when you want research, it is how do you know what's the cost of getting it? From patient side, if you get the right app or the right delivery of information to the patient, your cost of goods is nothing because they will keep giving you data because everyone is competitive.
Yeah.
They want to see, if you get a chart that shows them going there and the rest of the population going there, they will keep submitting data to that thing to track their own performance all the time. And actually all you have to give them is the means of being independent and interpreting that data. You don't have to buy the data off them, you don't have to trade with them, you have to give them a means of of using the data, and they will keep giving you, if you get that right, that data.
And then you commercialise that.
and then you can commercialise that. So you aggregate that into anonymised data sets, and you can then research. But if you, that supply chain bit, if you can hit on the what the consumer wants, and if you look at Tesco Clubcard and all those kind of models, there's well-established models at Dunnhumby, which was Tesco's kind of little analytical group that was sold for £3 billion. That if you get the consumer bit right, and you engage a consumer right, your supply chain costs are really low in terms of information.
Mark, you seem to buck all the trends in terms of successful entrepreneurs. Firstly, it doesn't sound like you went out and got money to actually start your business.
No.
You focus more on getting a business that was profitable, could pay for itself,
Sure.
rather than growth and volumes. And you also didn't have, even from what I heard, an exit plan, which is the focus for any investors coming in. And the questions that they'll ask is like, what's the exit? And it's almost like a lifetime business, which generally all investors are told kind of shun away from any kind of lifestyle business. And probably the last thing is it's your first gig, and you're successful at it.
Sure.
And it's usually the third or fourth that people are successful at.
Sure.
What do you think sets you apart from everybody else who kind of launches out this way?
I mean, we did have an exit plan. So we did have an exit plan. I'd say that it was just earlier than we wanted because of the various circumstances I said before. What sets us apart, really? I think that's a very good question. It's difficult to know because I've not walked a mile in anyone else's moccasins, kind of thing. But I guess if you go to how do you test, how do you get a concept? For me, that kind of corporate control and that structure and the finance, you know, it's great to be entrepreneurial, have loads of ideas and everything, but as soon as you kind of put that kind of proper process into your business, even if it's 3 people, do appraisals, do proper business planning, I'm all about numbers and stacking it up and researching your market. You know, it makes it look like, my flight, I had loads of crazy ideas every day, 101. But, I did the numbers. I did what I tell my customers to do. I got data, I looked at prices, I looked at everything. And then I went out and we sketched it all out. We did war games on paper. What would you buy it? Would you not? And we sold it. And part of being, I guess my entrepreneurial journey was being in a position of selling a £500,000 project that we'd never ever done before. We'd done it on paper. We thought we could do it, but knowing that I'd get someone to do it, but doing it that way rather than trying to do it, getting money, see if it works first. And that's the entrepreneurial bit, really, is going out, selling a dream, because it is a dream. It's on paper somewhere. It might be, and I guess that was the bit that I think was different, I guess, and it allowed us to pay out a cash flow.
Of course, you have to realise that this was a perfectly smooth hockey stick curve. There was never a low point.
No, absolutely no. I mean, Mike makes a really good point because our timing of our exit was good in the end. I mean, we were really profitable. But there was one story where we had a partnership with a doctor because we didn't have any servers. So I thought, right, we'll get a partnership with a doctor, and this guy, it was a complete nightmare from day one. Almost when I was signing, I was regretting. This is a highly compliant industry where they audit you within an inch of your life. And I went to his surgery, and he'd moved the servers. This is this crazy medic who lives in London. He had data, and he's a psychiatric specialist, so he had lots of psychiatric patients. He'd moved his servers, which had all the patient-sensitive data, next to the sink in his kitchen, where his psychiatric patients went to make coffee. I really couldn't understand why I was getting so irate about it. But fundamentally, he didn't understand the industry we work, the pharma industry. He's like, it's fine. It'll be fine now. I said, well, what if it gets wet for a start? He's next to the sink. It'll be fine. It's, it's not good. It's not bad. And I'm just thinking, if a pharma company turns up here now, I'm probably in jail next week. So it wasn't all, and that took us a long time to get out, a year and a half to get out of that partnership. So it was tight, very tight at times. Cash flow not easy, but it's those gulp moments of taking that next step. That next step for us in that instance was getting rid of him, paying £40,000 of money we didn't have, and then equally at the same time buying all that kit and getting the cage and our own servers and getting compliant. That was a lot for us to take on, which that point, but it was the best thing we did.
And what kept you going through those, like the low, such a low point?
There was no other choice. There was no other choice. But I think that we had something that people were buying. I think if I didn't, I know when we went, our strike rate and our model was good, and people were buying stuff, and we knew that we could plug any gaps with other services we had. But it wasn't easy, I have to say. When you get to 29 people, 28 people, 15 people, all your employees just they don't care about the issues you have.
And all of them hate you.
All of them hate you for a start, and they don't care about your. They do. If you've got the right values and the right people, they do care. But ultimately, they're not shareholders, they're not getting dividends. They just want paying every month. Sorry.
Jude.
I was just going to say that you almost answered that question earlier. You were saying you hadn't walked in other people's moccasins, but Mike could probably give the perspective of you against others and what was different.
I wish he'd changed his shoes. I think the numbers have been brought up quite a lot, and one way that Mark and Kathy's wife sort of stood out was a dominant view of the numbers, that they understood the metrics of their business and followed them on that way, whereas a lot of people, and as Mark said, even when they come from a corporate background, seem to throw that out the window and say, oh, well, it's all in the back of a fag packet, this sort of thing, and I'll just wing it. Whereas within that environment, Mark always knew exactly where he was, and that helped to enhance the confidence in the business, and to then enhance the confidence in the product, and then enhance the confidence that you could actually grow the business out of that. So I think having a lot of those infrastructure elements, and a lot of people wonder why we do it on that side of things, of just saying, well, let's actually provide you with the resources to set up the practical elements to actually do stuff at a sort of micro level on that basis, so you have the information. It was driven in part from working with people like Mark that saw actually what a strong company that made, and that they could answer questions and could always fall back on that, as opposed to just falling back on their own guts, if you like, to drive it forward. But also, it was genuine innovation. I think that's true as well. Where you realised it wasn't genuine, you walked away from it and came up with another idea, and driving that through, and recognising where your weaknesses are and how to build a team. So too many people, especially when they come from a consultancy background, just get more consultants that work in the same way, as opposed to building a team that can deliver a product and deliver efficiently and effectively what you are designing and taking forward. And so it's having that balance of personalities and ways of working within a business that actually gives you the infrastructure to deliver against it. And you had a beard. I think having beards is very important.
That was a tipping point in success for me. Servers and beard.
Okay, I think Mark's going to be around for a while longer.
Yeah.
So please have another drink, have a chat, and catch up with us. Thank you very much, Mark.
Thank you. The dream, yeah, that's the dream. I've got the dream, yeah.
That's the
See you later. She says, oh,